smile. Sebastian Hartwell adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. People are watching. Isabella Bennet stared at him in disbelief. The crystal chandeliers above them sparkled across the grand ballroom, while hundreds of nobles laughed, danced, and celebrated around them. But somehow the room felt painfully silent. "Sebastian," she whispered. He finally looked at her. His expression remained calm, cold, almost bored. "Do not make a scene." The words hit harder than the humiliation itself, because only moments earlier, Sebastian had publicly announced the end of their engagement. 5 years. 5 years of promises, letters, future plans. 5 years reduced to a few sentences spoken beneath a ballroom full of witnesses. The Royal Winter Gala had been intended as their formal engagement celebration. Instead, it became Isabella's public execution. Nobles whispered openly now. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked entertained, but nobody intervened. No one ever intervened when powerful men shattered women politely. Isabella felt her throat tighten. "You could have told me beforehand," Sebastian exhaled impatiently. "Would that have changed anything?" She stared at him. Her heart felt strangely numb now, perhaps because the shock was finally wearing off. "Why?" she asked softly. For the first time, he hesitated. Then he glanced toward the center of the ballroom. A beautiful young countess stood surrounded by admirers. Her golden dress shimmered beneath the chandeliers. "Because feelings change." The simplicity of the answer nearly made Isabella laugh. 5 years destroyed by a sentence. People often imagine heartbreak arrives dramatically, screaming, crying, begging. But the truth is usually quieter. Something simply breaks, and suddenly nothing hurts because everything does. "I see," Isabella whispered. Sebastian nodded once. "You will recover." Then he walked away. Just like that. No apology, no regret, no dignity left for her to preserve. The crowd immediately parted for him while Isabella remained standing alone near the ballroom staircase. Her hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together before anyone could notice. The worst part was not losing him. The worst part was realizing she had spent 5 years loving someone capable of humiliating her without remorse. A woman nearby whispered loudly enough to be heard. "How embarrassing," another replied. "Poor thing. Poor thing." Isabella hated those words. She turned quickly and headed toward the balcony before anyone could see the tears threatening to appear. The cold winter air hit her immediately once she stepped outside. Snow covered the palace gardens below. Music drifted faintly through the open ballroom doors behind her. She gripped the marble railing tightly and stared into the darkness. "Do not cry," she whispered to herself. "Not here." But grief rarely follows instructions. The first tear slipped down her cheek anyway. Then another, then another. For several minutes she simply stood there, trying desperately to pull herself together. She thought about her father. He had died 3 years earlier. She thought about her mother living quietly in the countryside. She thought about every letter she had ever written Sebastian, every dream she had built around a future that no longer existed. And then a calm male voice interrupted the silence. "You are standing dangerously close to the edge." Isabella froze. She wiped her tears quickly before turning around. Duke Alexander Ravenshire stood near the balcony entrance. Tall, dark-haired, impossibly composed. Even among royalty, Alexander carried a reputation unlike anyone else. People called him the Cold Duke, not because he was cruel, because he was distant. He rarely attended social events, never participated in gossip, and showed almost no interest in romance. Some believed he had never been in love. Others believed he was incapable of it. Isabella immediately straightened. "Your Grace?" Alexander's eyes briefly lingered on the tears she had failed to hide. Then he looked away politely. "Forgive the interruption." "You're not interrupting anything." A faint eyebrow lifted. Most people standing alone on balconies while crying would disagree. Heat rushed into Isabella's cheeks. She looked away, embarrassed. "I was not crying." "Of course not." His completely serious tone almost sounded sarcastic. For the first time all evening, she nearly smiled. Alexander stepped beside the railing overlooking the gardens below. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt strangely comfortable. "The court moves quickly," he said eventually. Isabella knew exactly what he meant. News traveled fast inside royal circles. Apparently. "People enjoy watching public disasters?" She glanced at him in surprise. "That sounds unusually cynical." "Experience." His answer came immediately. Isabella studied him carefully. Most people described Alexander as emotionally distant, but standing here now, he seemed more observant than cold. "Did you come out here to avoid the crowd too?" she asked. "Yes? Then perhaps we are hiding together." For the first time, something shifted slightly in his expression. Not quite amusement, but close. "Perhaps." The ballroom music swelled behind them. Isabella looked toward the doors. "I should probably leave." "You could." She frowned slightly. "That sounds like there is another option." Alexander looked toward the ballroom. "There is." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned toward her completely. Then he extended his hand. The gesture caught her completely off guard. "Your Grace?" "One dance," Isabella blinked. "What?" "You were publicly humiliated less than 20 minutes ago." His voice remained calm. "If you leave now, that will be the story everyone remembers." She stared at him speechlessly. "And if I stay?" Then they remember something else. The realization hit instantly. He was offering her dignity, not pity, not rescue. Dignity, a way to walk back into that ballroom without looking broken. "You do not even know me," she whispered. Alexander's gaze remained steady. "I know enough." For several seconds, Isabella simply stared at the hand extended toward her. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. The moment his fingers closed around hers, something shifted inside her chest. Not romance, not attraction, just relief. For the first time that evening, someone was treating her like a person instead of a spectacle. The ballroom fell noticeably quieter when they entered together. Isabella immediately felt hundreds of eyes turning toward them. Whispers spread rapidly across the room. She heard her name. She heard Alexander's name. She heard Sebastian's too, but this time she did not lower her head. The orchestra continued playing as Alexander guided her onto the dance floor. "You realize this will become tomorrow's biggest rumor." "Yes." "And that does not concern you?" "No." His answer came so quickly that Isabella laughed softly before she could stop herself. Alexander glanced down slightly. "There it is." "What?" "Your real smile." The word surprised her. She had forgotten how to smile tonight. The dance began slowly beneath the chandeliers. Around them, nobles watched openly. Some appeared shocked, others fascinated. Sebastian certainly noticed. Isabella could feel his gaze from across the ballroom. She refused to look. "You are very calm," she observed. Alexander's hand remained steady against hers. "I have learned panic rarely improves situations." That sounds like something an old philosopher would say. "I have been called worse." Another laugh escaped her, this time genuine, and suddenly she realized something strange. She had spent years with Sebastian and rarely felt understood. She had spent 10 minutes with Alexander and somehow felt seen. Then the music softened. Alexander looked toward her carefully. "Do you know what most people do after public humiliation?" "Hide." "Exactly." His gaze remained steady. "But surviving embarrassment often begins by refusing to disappear." The words settled deeply inside her, because that was exactly what she wanted to do. Disappear. Leave, hide, for the rest of the evening, if possible. But perhaps he was right. Perhaps surviving meant staying. The dance ended beneath applause. Isabella expected Alexander to immediately step away. Instead, he offered a small bow. "Would you care to remain for dinner?" She blinked. "You're inviting me?" "Unless you have other plans." She looked across the ballroom. One glance toward Sebastian confirmed he was watching now, confused, annoyed, perhaps even jealous. Good. For the first time all night, Isabella felt something other than pain. Dinner sounds lovely, she replied, and somewhere across the ballroom, Sebastian Hartwell finally realized the woman he had humiliated was no longer standing alone.
Heartbreak has a strange way of revealing who people really are. Some people leave when life becomes inconvenient. Others stay when they have absolutely no reason to. Isabella thought losing Sebastian was the worst thing that could happen to her. But sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as rejection. The truth is, many of us have experienced a moment when someone made us feel like we weren't enough, not beautiful enough, not successful enough, not worthy enough, and yet the people who truly belong in our lives never make us question our value. They help us see it. If this story is touching your heart so far, subscribe now for more emotional royal Roman stories filled with healing, heartbreak, and unforgettable love. And tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered that losing someone was actually the best thing that ever happened to you?
The following morning, every major newspaper in the kingdom carried some version of the same headline. The cold duke dances with a heartbroken fiancé. Some articles were romantic, others were ridiculous. One claimed Alexander Ravenshire had challenged Sebastian Hartwell to a duel. None of them were true, but the rumors spread anyway. That was how royal society worked. Isabella sat quietly beside the breakfast table, staring at one particularly dramatic article, while her mother tried unsuccessfully not to smile. "You seem popular. Please do not encourage this." "I am not encouraging it." Her mother folded another newspaper. "I am enjoying it." Isabella laughed despite herself. The sound felt unfamiliar. After the humiliation at the gala, she expected days of misery instead. Something else had happened. She had survived. The world had not ended. She was embarrassed, hurt, confused, but alive. And somehow that mattered. Then a servant entered carrying a sealed envelope. "For you, my lady." Isabella frowned. The wax seal immediately caught her attention. A raven crest, Alexander Ravenshire. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short note. "I hope the newspapers are being less dramatic than usual. Alexander." Her lips twitched. "What does it say?" her mother asked. "Nothing important." "That smile suggests otherwise." Before Isabella could answer, another line caught her attention. "If you require temporary escape from society's fascination, Blackwood Gardens remain unusually quiet this time of year." Isabella read the sentence twice, then 3 times. She had no idea why her heartbeat suddenly accelerated. By afternoon, she found herself walking through the enormous gardens surrounding Ravenshire Manor. Snow still covered portions of the grounds, but spring flowers had begun pushing through the frost. The place felt peaceful, silent. Alexander was waiting beside a frozen fountain. "You came. You invited me." Most people decline invitations from mysterious dukes. Most people were not publicly humiliated last week. A faint smile appeared briefly. Fair point. Over the following weeks, something unexpected developed. Not romance at first. Friendship. Real friendship. They walked through gardens. They discussed books, politics, history, music. Alexander listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his observations were surprisingly thoughtful. Isabella gradually discovered that the man society called cold was actually careful. There was a difference. He did not waste words. He did not chase attention. He did not pretend to be someone else. And after years with Sebastian, Isabella found honesty strangely refreshing. One afternoon, they sat beneath an old oak tree overlooking the estate lake. "Why do people call you cold?" she asked. Alexander considered the question. "Because I dislike pretending." "That cannot be the only reason. Most people prefer performance over sincerity." His gaze drifted across the water. "I lost my father young. After that, I learned people often confuse emotional restraint with lack of feeling." The answer lingered between them. Isabella understood more than she expected. because she too had spent years misunderstood. Then, slowly, almost without realizing it, she began looking forward to seeing him. The sound of his voice, the way he noticed details others ignored, the quiet comfort of his presence, and that realization terrified her, because heartbreak leaves scars, even after the wound closes. Months passed. Spring transformed the kingdom. Flowers replaced snow. Sunlight replaced winter skies. And somewhere during those months, Sebastian Hartwell began noticing something he had never expected. Isabella was happy. The realization bothered him more than it should have. He saw her laughing during royal events. He saw her standing beside Alexander. He saw the confidence returning to her eyes. The woman he had expected to remain broken seemed stronger than ever. One evening he finally approached her during a palace banquet. "You seem well," Isabella turned calmly. "Good evening, Sebastian." The formal tone immediately unsettled him. "I wanted to speak with you." "About?" He hesitated. For perhaps the first time in his life, words failed him. "Us," Isabella stared at him quietly. Then she smiled, not cruelly, not bitterly, just peacefully. "There is no us anymore." The simplicity of the answer hit harder than anger would have. Sebastian watched her walk away moments later, and for the first time, regret began settling heavily inside his chest, because people often assume they miss someone immediately after losing them. Real regret usually arrives later, when replacement proves impossible. A few weeks afterward, the kingdom hosted the Spring Royal Ball, the largest celebration of the year. Hundreds of nobles gathered beneath thousands of candles. Music filled the palace. Gold chandeliers illuminated every corner. Isabella stood near the ballroom entrance wearing deep blue silk when Alexander approached. His eyes briefly widened. "You look beautiful." Her heart stumbled. "You clean up nicely yourself." "High praise." "Try not to become arrogant. I shall do my best." The evening passed comfortably until the king announced the traditional opening dance. Couples moved toward the ballroom floor. Alexander extended his hand immediately. "May I?" Isabella smiled. "You may." As they stepped onto the dance floor, applause echoed softly around them. Then something unexpected happened. Halfway through the dance, Alexander stopped. The movement startled her. "Alexander?" The ballroom gradually quieted. People noticed. Then he looked directly at her. "There is something I have wanted to tell you for months." Isabella's heartbeat accelerated immediately. The entire room seemed to disappear. His gaze never left hers. "The night I met you on that balcony, I thought I was helping a stranger." Silence spread through the ballroom. Instead, I met the bravest woman I have ever known. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Alexander continued. "You walked back into a room determined to remember your humiliation and taught everyone there a different story instead." The ballroom remained completely silent now. "You taught me something too." His voice softened. "That strength does not always look like power. Sometimes it looks like kindness surviving disappointment." Isabella could barely breathe. Then Alexander reached into his coat and removed a small velvet box. The crowd gasped collectively. Her hands immediately began trembling. "Alexander, I have never cared much about society's expectations." A faint smile appeared. "But I care very much about you." The box opened. A beautiful sapphire ring sparkled beneath the candlelight. "Will you marry me?" Tears slipped freely down Isabella's cheeks now. She looked around briefly. The crowd watched breathlessly. Then her gaze found Sebastian standing near the edge of the ballroom. For one brief moment their eyes met. He looked devastated, not angry, devastated. And suddenly Isabella realized something important. She felt nothing, no resentment, no longing, no regret. The chapter had ended. Then she looked back at Alexander, the man who had asked one dance when everyone else watched her fall, the man who never treated her like something broken, the man who saw her value before she saw it herself. "Yes," she whispered. The ballroom erupted into applause, music, cheers. But Alexander seemed to hear only her. He slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her gently into his arms. The crowd disappeared. The noise disappeared. Everything disappeared except relief. Because sometimes the best thing that can happen to a person is not getting the love they wanted. It is losing it and discovering something better waiting on the other side. Months later, Isabella stood once again on a palace balcony overlooking the gardens below, the same type of balcony where her life had changed forever. Alexander joined her quietly and wrapped an arm around her waist. Thinking? Remembering? Good memories? She smiled softly. The best ones. Below them, music drifted across the evening air. Fireworks illuminated the sky in celebration of their wedding festivities. Isabella rested her head against his shoulder. You know, she said quietly, that night could have destroyed me. Alexander kissed her forehead gently. But it didn't. No, she smiled. Because a cold duke asked for one dance. He laughed softly. People really need to stop calling me cold. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now for more emotional royal romance stories filled with heartbreak, healing, second chances, and unforgettable love. And tell me in the comments, do you believe the best relationships often begin after the wrong one ends? Because sometimes rejection is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is simply life redirecting you toward the person who was always meant to find you.
One of the hardest lessons life teaches is that not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Sometimes people walk away because they were never meant to stay. Sebastian's rejection felt like the end of Isabella's world in that ballroom. But if he had never broken her heart, she might never have met the man who truly saw her. Real love does not arrive to complete you. It arrives to remind you that you were already worthy all along. And maybe that's why the most beautiful love stories aren't about finding the perfect person. They're about finding the person who recognizes your value when you've forgotten it yourself. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more deeply emotional royal romance stories. And tell me below, what was the moment that made you believe Alexander truly loved Isabella?